Alright, I think it's about time for us to get this started. Nobody's here right now, but that's okay. I didn't actually expect a whole lot of people to show up for this one. It's a bad weekend to do so, and it's a bad subject to do so on. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it's going to be. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get things started here. We're going to go ahead and strike that. We're going to go ahead and adjust our background audio. Just like that. And then I think we are good to go. So, hello, Shadowcat back with another lecture. Today we are covering something that nobody wants to talk about, but has been the subject on a lot of people's minds over the last several years and in a growing number, and that is the topic of the Black Pill, which on its own is a subject that needs a little bit of explanation. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to knock out a quick little explanation as to the online pills. Then we're going to move into a few things that I would like to reference back to while I'm doing this. After that, I do have a few things to catch up on from other streams that are going to feed into this one. And then I want to talk about kind of why I'm talking about this right now. So, first things first. On the screen, you can see I have this lovely visual aid that should not have taken you this long to read, and it was brought to us by our friends over at the American Defamation League, the ADL. Okay, I can't say that with a straight face. The ADL are no one's friends, and believe me, we could do an entire lecture on just them alone. But they have this wonderful little graphic here that I think is perfect for what I need right now. So let's get into a topic of the online pills. And for that, we have to take a little bit of a history detour. As a matter of fact, why don't I pull something else up? Let me pull something else up real quick here. Just so that I can have this as a reference. No, I don't want that. I want to go back to where I was.
Do you want?
Okay. So right here we have these pills, but before we cover this, I want to just share something. There we go. Let me bring this down. And this is, of course, a scene from The Matrix, which is from 1999. Is it really that old now? So I'm just going to leave the sound off. I'm just going to play this in the background. Most people have probably seen this before. If you haven't, this is a scene where the main character, Neo, is given a choice. He can make a choice to go with the other guy sitting in the chair, or he can make a choice to stay in the world that he's in right now. And he's offered a choice. He's offered one of, if I skip ahead a little bit, 2 pills. He takes the blue pill, the story ends, he wakes up in his bed, he's allowed to go on believing whatever he wants to believe. He takes the red pill, and he gets to show him everything that he thinks he knows. But he's going to show him the truth. And of course, this is what kicks off the entire movie, because he says, remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. And once you take it, you can't go back. So we're going to stop it right there. We don't need this anymore. So this is where the idea of the pills started. It was from this very influential scene in The Matrix. And so this idea just kind of permeated through internet culture. It was memed to pieces and back, and it began to seep into other things. Eventually, because politics is downstream from culture, As the pill idea moved downstream, eventually it got into politics. Now, this happened just as the sociopolitical sphere in the West, not just in the US, but in the West in general, North America and Western Europe. This happened when the sociopolitical culture really started to divide. This is actually before the idea of woke as a thing, but not entirely. Woke was just beginning to kind of gestate. It didn't have a name yet, but the roots were there. And so the idea was that you would have people who would say that they have been awakened to the truth. This is where woke would eventually come from. People that see the world for what it is, and they see all the horrible things that are going on in the world. These are the people that, let me collect my words here for a minute. These were generally people who kind of grew up either during the civil rights era or immediately afterward, who after the civil rights era happened, after we had the, 17th Amendment, I think, and the 19th Amendment? I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and review the Constitution. But after the Civil Rights Act was in effect and all people were supposed to be equal, these were the people that said, yeah, it's not equal. It never was equal. It's never going to be equal. We covered this a little bit in our previous discussion on reparations, where I pointed out that, for many, many people, there is no such thing as reparations. Because there is no such thing as a point where you would consider things repaired. The idea of reparations being that you are supposed to be repairing an ill done. And so you've always had these people who believe that everything is broken, everything is wrong, and it can't be fixed. For a long time, though, those people were a very small minority. And to a certain degree, they were kind of right. The fact is, nothing is perfect. Nothing has ever been perfect. Nothing will ever be perfect. Hence why you have people like the communists saying that they're just, they're just trying for utopia without the understanding that utopia will never, ever happen. It can't. Nothing is ever perfect. And just as a point, not related to this, but there's a reason why nothing is ever perfect. And that reason is called entropy. The universe is ruled by entropy. Entropy is what makes hot things go cold. It is what makes stable things collapse. Everything falls apart over time because everything seeks the lowest energy state. And so you could have the most perfect object in the world, and given enough time, it will fall apart without you having to do anything with it, without you having to touch it, without you having to look at it. Because that's what things do. Nothing is ever perfect. Now, we can understand that nothing is ever perfect. And we can run with that and just kind of assume that, things are not perfect, but they could be worse. Or we could also just kind of assume that nothing is ever perfect. In fact, everything is horribly broken. Everything can never be fixed. And so the only real option is to just kind of burn it all down. Well, now we're getting into kind of the crux of the pills. So, when it came to normal people are kind of the uninitiated. Okay, they're the people who go to work. They raise families, they pay their taxes, they pay their bills, they get on. They get on. And that's fine for most people. Most people don't have anything that they really need to worry about, and so they don't worry about it. It's all good. Let's see. I forgot to pop out my chat. Hold on a second. Chat. Pop out. There it is. Oh, hey, JP's in the house. See, this is what happens when I don't have my chat. Hello, JP. I'm sorry I didn't see you when you first came in. I am just still horrible at doing this. I'm actually kind of surprised that anybody showed up, to be honest. So the idea behind the online pills is that you would have a normal person, and a normal person could look at the world and say, the things that are going on, are things staying the same? Are they getting better, or are they getting worse? Now, depending on kind of your ideology and on your position in the political spectrum, that answer might change. But by and large, it came to be understood as the red pill if you were to just open your eyes and say, you know what? My life is pretty good. In fact, our lives are pretty good. However, things have been getting worse. And things are going to continue to get worse unless we take action. Because, again, the universe is entropy. A system left on its own will degrade over time, and it needs to be maintained. And we have not been maintaining it. So it came to be known as taking the red pill. And the red pill just meant, yes, I see the problems, I understand the system for what it is, and I think that we need to get to work on fixing it. Of course, if you're going to have a red pill, then you need to have, of course, a blue pill. The blue pill being that everything is fine. You don't need to do anything, you don't need to lift a finger, everything is good, go on living your life. And that's it. That is all the blue pill was. It's just big ol' thumbs up. Now, according to this one, there is, of course, the purple pill, which is not one that you hear about very often. The purple pill, of course, is the, it's the compromise, saying that, yeah, there's problems in the system, but nothing that's too bad. Things that need to be fixed, but nothing that's going to collapse the world tomorrow. And hello, Flame, good to have you in the chat. Flame says, I love it when people make serious videos about memes. Oh, trust me. Trust me. We're going to be getting far past memes by the end of this. Buckle your seatbelt, baby. We're getting into this one. Alright, so that leaves the last one on the list, and that being the black pill. Now, I actually kind of disagree with part of this, because according to the ADL, again, the Anti-Defamation League that we all know and love and who are everybody's friends, they say the black pill, the system is or cannot be fixed. Revolution, race war, and violence are the only cure. Now, of course, you have to remember that this is the ADL we're talking about here, and the website that I got, or web page that I got this off of, is a web page all about how extreme right-wing incels are a threat to the entire nation. Again, the ADL are a serious organization. In fact, I wonder. Yeah, here we go. Just because I want to I want to show my work here. Let me find that again. Twitter, Facebook. Wait, did it come from their Twitter page? Okay, it did come from their Twitter page. Oh, but it does lead back here. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So, let me just bring up my browser again. So, turn on notifications. I'm not even on Twitter. I don't have a Twitter account. What would I turn on? Okay, So this is their Twitter page, and of course, if you follow the link right here, it leads to here. The Extremist Medicine Cabinet, a guide to online pills. And of course, we have all these Nazi pills that somebody's just throwing down by the handful. Again, these are serious people who run a serious organization. In fact, like I said, I could make an entire video about them, and believe me, they are half the problem. Which we may as well go ahead and kind of get into now. So the black pill says that primarily what we need to focus on is that first sentence. The system cannot be fixed. Not that it has problems. We know that it has problems. The problem now is that there is no fixing it. See, I have likened in my previous videos, and I may as well get into this now, I am going to be making references to several of my previous live streams here. Well, not necessarily live streams, but I'm going to be making references to my discussion on law, which is like one of the first ones that I ever did. I'm going to be referencing immovable opinions, and basically just, partisanship in general. We're going to be talking about the progressive religion that we find ourselves steeped in. I'm going to be talking about the Civil War that we're already kind of in, and I will discuss that more when we get to it. And I also want to talk about the slippery slope fallacy that we just did a few weeks ago, and more importantly, logical progression. So, if you are not familiar with any of these discussions, then I promise you're not going to be that out of the loop, but you may want to go back and kind of revisit those lectures when you have time. Because they are going to come up. So the black pill. The system cannot be fixed. In another previous video that I did, and I didn't have it pulled up here, I talked about how we find ourselves in a civil war. But it's not just a civil war. When I talk about on immovable opinions and on the idea of civil war, I do so because we don't find ourselves as much in a civil war as we have found ourselves in a religious war. This is something that I have talked with people about before, and they've said that they don't understand how we're in a religious war. So let me explain this. The idea of a religious war is not a complicated one because before we had political wars, we had two kinds of wars. The first, of course, the very first war that humanity ever engaged in, going all the way back to prehistory when we technically don't even have records, but we also don't need records because we know what was going on. The first wars we had were wars over territory and resources. Because nothing else matters if you can't eat. So that was the only thing that really mattered. We would go to war with another tribe to say, you have food, you have lumber, you have shelter, you have water, you have things we need, and we're going to take them. This goes back to when we were still primates. And for, chimpanzee tribes still do this today. Yes, chimpanzees have wars. You cannot say that war is a human invention now. You can't get away with that anymore. Chimpanzees have wars. Probably other primates do too. However, the second kind were religious wars. And religious wars really just stipulate or stand up to, what is the word I want here? I don't know. The basis of religious wars is, I have a God that I believe in. We have principles that we believe in. We have our faith. And we all over here agree that your faith is bad. And so either because you're pushing your faith on us, or we're just no longer tolerating yours, your faith is going away. Because we're going to remove it by force. We're not doing this anymore. And so we had religious wars. Now, what is this founded on? It's not as if it's over resources. You're not going to war because you don't have enough food. You're not going to war because there's not enough space. Although, depending on how things are encroaching upon one another, yeah, maybe. Not generally the reason, but it could be. No, we're going to war on ideological purposes. For no other reason than we believe them bad. We have seen this going all the way back to the original civilizations, where you had different tribes among the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas, who would, go to war with each other. Or if they ever met, they would try and wipe each other out. We saw this through medieval history. Specifically, I'm talking about the Crusades and the Jihads. These were a series of religious wars going back between Christianity and Islam. And we see it today. Because whether people want to admit it or not, we are in the middle of a religious war. It just doesn't look like one that we've seen before because we don't necessarily have churches and priests and imams and mosques. We don't necessarily have books and banners, although we do kind of have that, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what we do have are religions. Now, if we're gonna discuss this, why don't we first establish what is a religion? And in fact, why don't I go ahead and pull up a dictionary definition here? So, dictionary, religion. I'm not going to bother pulling this up because it's just a definition. This is from the Oxford Languages Dictionary. It says the belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or gods. However, it could be a particular system of faith and worship, and a pursuit or interest in which somebody ascribes supreme importance. All of those are very good definitions, and all of them are kind of leaning towards the same thing. Very importantly, they are all beliefs. Now, the thing about belief is that you can believe in anything. After all, we have Pastafarians and Scientologists. Both of their beliefs are equally valid. Both of them are equally wrong, but both of them are equally valid. There is no flying spaghetti monster, and there is no alien who came down here to start a world war. Or something like that. It is something like that, right? I don't know. Flame says, you mean RimWorld ideologies? Well, if you wanted to start a religious war, you could do that, yeah. Point is, though, that when it comes to religion, it's a system of beliefs. And beliefs do not require evidence. And Blizzard Star is in the chat. Hello, Blizz. So a religion can be anything. This is one of the reasons why Eastern philosophy also tends to get mixed up in religion, because Eastern philosophy usually carries with it a doctrine of beliefs for how to live, because they believe that they will lead you to living a better, more spiritually fulfilling life. Most Eastern philosophies do not believe in higher beings, and we're talking like Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, things like this. They don't have gods so much, but they still tend to be lumped into religions because they have a system of beliefs that you're supposed to follow. And that right there is the core of it. Whether it is an Eastern philosophy or whether it is a Western faith, every single one of them has one thing in common, in that it has beliefs and tenets that you need to follow. This is very important foundation because you don't question the beliefs. You don't. Questioning the beliefs is heresy. Now, every religion will have its own treatment of heretics. In Islam, heresy is punishable by death. Usually very swift death, although, depending on what sect of Islam you're in, sometimes they will try to bring their lost heretics back into the fold, and they'll only result to excommunication or execution if that can no longer be done. Other religions, like, say, Christianity, don't care. Like, you can be a Christian heretic and people don't care. And if you're a Buddhist heretic, then people will just kind of look at you with pity, because you're only hurting yourself. The point is, though, you're not allowed to disagree with the religion or question it, otherwise you are a heretic. I have to make this point very clear because we have, in the West, in the Western world, we have a new religion, and it is called the woke. I'm sure it has other names that you could go by, but the woke is generally the best and most accepted one for it. And the woke has certain tenets that it believes. It has certain priests that will, well, preach. And you are not allowed to disagree with it because any disagreement is heresy. If you can't question it, if you can't disagree with it, then it is, as I did an entire video on, an immovable opinion. It is a rock. It is the immovable object, just waiting for somebody to try and move it with an unstoppable force. The problem is that you really can't find an unstoppable force usually. And the rock, if it's an unmovable rock, that means that if you can move it, like roll it downhill, that also means that nothing can stop it from moving. I mean, if no force can move it in the first place, then if it does move, no force can stop it. That's just logic. So we have a religion here, and we are in the middle of a religious war, because these people have their doctrines, they have their tenets, they have their priests, they have their cathedrals, which, by the way, they do. Their cathedrals are not, steepled towers. They are instead major institutions in nations. We're talking universities, we're talking media corporations, we're talking legislatures, we're talking courts. They do have their churches, they just don't look the same as everybody else's. And they currently believe that they are on a religious war. They firmly believe that it is their job to spread their ideas, their tenets, to everybody else. And we see this because they push them everywhere. They push them through every single media source. They push them on billboards and on train benches and everything else. They stand on street corners. They march in parades. They do everything they can to spread their message. They are proselytizing. So, if we have one side who is waging an ideological religious war, then what does that mean? That means that it's them versus either a particular other religion, or it's them versus literally everybody else. Either way, the fight's there. As I pointed out in another video, I do believe on gun control, you don't always get to pick a fight. Sometimes the fight is picked with you, and you don't get a choice in the matter. So we are in the middle of this. And this is part of where the black pill comes in, because many of these people who are also preaching this also believe in the black pill. We can look at the system and say the system is broken. We can look at them and say these people have captured the institutions. They are allowed to preach on every corner, preach on all of the airwaves, preach on the internet, preach on broadcast, do all of this stuff. They're in your churches, they're in your schools, they're in your courts. The system is broken and cannot be fixed. But what do we see on the other side? On the other side, we have them preaching. We have them preaching that we, as the people who were here first, the people who founded the nations, the people who have worked to build them over time, the people who work in the factories, who, pave the roads and do everything else, the people who have normal families and who are, if they are religious, if they are Christian or Jewish or Islamic, or even people who are not particularly religious but just particularly conservative, who believe in having families, raising children, things like this. They believe on the other side that these people are a threat to their way of life. These people do not agree with the Pride agenda. They do not believe in the Pride banner. And many of these people, if given a chance, would at least cease tolerating it. If not, ban it outright. And they believe that because the country was founded on all of these things, because you have all these people who support the tenets in which the country was founded on, the country is broken and cannot be fixed. It must be overthrown, burned down, and rebuilt anew through revolution or just ideological capture. This is very important because I want to bring up something that came out, this was in 2020. Now, I haven't read this, but I'm going to share this article with you, because it's something that I've heard referenced many times. And, by the way, trigger warning to all the people out there, because there's an image here that may trigger you. Don't look at the image. It's a very triggering image. No, I'm kidding. Look at the image. Look at it. Look at it. What color is the dress? Come on. What color is the dress? You know you want to have a flame war in the fight. Now, Flame has an advantage on this one because it's literally in their name. But, come on, you can have it out in the chat. Anyway. The idea is this, and I'm just going to read this article with you. President Trump has never led in the polls. What's more, the deficit he faces is far larger than the one he faced in 2016. The quiet signs of trouble in key districts that plagued Hillary Clinton aren't present this time around. Trump trails in every single swing state, sometimes by double digits. Democrats, or perhaps more accurately Trump's antics, have even made states like Georgia and Texas competitive, and Dems may turn parts of the South blue again for the first time in more than a generation. Voters will also see Biden as a way to end the chaos that swirls around Trump at all times, and which manifests in the social unrest caused by the right-wing agitators in cities across the country. On top of all that, Dems have been wildly outraising and outspending Republicans, reflecting the desire the country has to vote Trump and company out of office. Tomorrow night should be quick and decisive victory for Joe Biden. Despite concerns around vote counting that takes days or weeks, none of that will be necessary as Biden amasses more than 270 electors by midnight on November 3rd, and Democrats ride a blue wave to full federal control of Congress and the White House. Also, I'm checking the chat, and immediately it's already started. Blue, black, gold, white, blue, gold. Let's see, we got blue, black, gold, white, blue, gold. I'm going to say gold, black, just so that we have a full, we've got every combination, I think. The honest answer is that the absolute truth is, I don't care. It's a dress. Either wear it or don't. So anyway, getting back to reading. The outcome of the 2020 election is obvious. The pollsters haven't learned their lesson from 2016, and they don't account for factors that point to overperformance by Trump. What's more, Trump voters are exceptionally shy. Many of them don't want to trigger insults and harassment from the shrill, hectoring progressives revealing their support for the president. Some of them intentionally mislead pollsters to undermine media trust even beyond its current all-time low. And while rally size isn't a pure indicator of electoral success, the pervasive contrast in voter enthusiasm between Trump and Biden voters highlights the Biden vulnerability. Moderate independent voters who otherwise may have been disposed to vote for Biden will vote for Trump due to the fears and worry around a widespread vandalism and unrest that marked progressive protests around the country. On top of all that, Trump has quietly been shifting voter registration towards Republicans over the past 4 years, especially in key states. Pollsters haven't properly accounted for this shift or the shy voter factor, and Trump will stun the experts again on election night. In short, Trump will secure close, if declarative or decisive victory in most swing states. So much so, in fact, that he may not even need Pennsylvania. Despite concerns around vote counting that takes days or weeks, none of that will be necessary as Trump amasses more than 270 electoral votes by midnight, November 3rd, and Republicans retain control of the Senate for at least 2 more years, and the White House for another 4. Now, he writes, I have been reading and hearing both of these narratives since the summer, and by the way, I agree. Because I heard all of that too. I follow the news. I am steeped in it every single day. Mostly because I kind of discovered politics like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that, maybe 10 years ago, and found out that politics is fascinating. So I steep myself in this every day. And I heard both of those all the time, every day, 24 hours a day. You could literally turn on CNN and Fox, one in your right ear, one in your left ear, and hear them say the same exact thing about their candidate, except they're completely opposite. The point being, they are mutually exclusive. And it's not even a matter of one of these people is right and one of these people is wrong. We're not talking about a math equation where you're either going to get the right answer or you're going to get the wrong answer. What we're talking about here is the reason why I wanted to bring this up. This is from Scott Adams' book, Win Bigly, which I have not read, and since reading is kind of hard for me, I'm probably not going to. But he described the phenomenon in his book as something he called 2 movies, 1 screen. The idea that 2 people or 2 groups of people are observing the same data, but processing the information so differently that they each reach a different conclusion about reality. Now, I wanted to bring this point up and make it kind of a focal point for this because of what I just described before, the religious war that we find ourselves in. Whether you are a normal U.S. conservative citizen or just kind of an independent person who doesn't really care what's going on as long as you can feed your family, keep your house, and eat. Or if you're on the left and you're part of the woke religion who thinks that you have to overthrow the country because there's something wrong with the country. Both of these groups agree that something is wrong. Both of them see the same system. The exact same system. They see the same media, the same courts, the same education, the same schools. They see the same of everything. They both agree there is a problem with it. But they have absolutely diametric opinions on what the problem is. Now, why am I covering this right now? Why is this included in my discussion on the black pill? The reason why this is in my discussion on the black pill is because the black pill says the system cannot be fixed. This is true. And I hate to be the person that's going to say that, but it is true. The system in the West, not just in the US, not just in Canada, not just in the UK, but the system of Western democracy is broken. And it cannot be fixed. Now, that might sound like the end of the discussion right there. However, it's not. And I want to talk more about that. And believe it or not, there is still one more pill to talk about, and that is the white pill. I'm going to save that for the end, because there is a white pill here. But it's not the focus of this discussion. Instead, we're going to focus on the black one. The reason why I bring this up is because every single action that one side thinks they're going to take to fix the system, the other side takes as an action to further cement the broken system. After all, if you have a conservative who says that we need to better integrate the idea of hard work and bootstrapping people that we have been using for 250 years in this country, okay? They may say that, this country was built on the labor of a man's back, and that's how it should be. A man should be able to work, to take care of his family, to take care of his wife, his children, his home. You have another side that says, number one, that's patriarchal, it's sexist, it's racist because of the racial issues in this country. It is every single problem, and it's not that we need to have more of this kind of conservative bootstrapping in the country. We need to get rid of the conservative idea that this country was ever good, and we need to remake it entirely. These two things are incompatible, and there is no solution here. When it comes to the idea of education, JP says, should we add bitter and jagged? We could. Maybe, if you want to. Wait, are we talking about like the bitter and jagged pill? Because I don't know those. I just know colors. I'm sorry, this is like the third grade version of the black pill discussion, because I'm taking all my pills from the Crayola box, and somebody has eaten many of the crayons. It may have been me. I'm not apologizing. Anyway, when it comes to the subject of education, we have conservatives who want a certain level of education where they're just talking, let's just go with the basic education. Reading, writing, math. Okay? Letters, words, and numbers. That's all we need out of education. That's it. You have another group that says that we need to be teaching more social issues in school. We need to be teaching not necessarily reading and math. These things are important, yes. But we need to be teaching social issues. We need to be teaching gender issues and sexuality issues. And JP says, was I a Marine? I was not a Marine. However, my father was in the Navy. So, it's genetic. Anyway, we cannot even agree on how we should be teaching our children. These things are diametrically opposed. One wants to put letters and numbers first. One wants to put social issues first. These things can both be taught, but they can't both be taught at the same time. Especially when you talk about how some of these people are talking, or some of the people on the woke side have been discussing how the conventional idea of mathematics is racist. If you're going to have somebody who comes out and says the conventional idea of mathematics that we have been developing since the days of ancient Greece, and if you want to go even further back, the days of the Persian Empire, if you're going to say that this is racist, I don't think there's a discussion to be had there. So again, we have two groups that absolutely will not come together and agree on this. The system is broken, and it cannot be fixed. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed reparations. We discussed reparations, restitution, retribution, and revenge. And in that, I discussed how the idea of restitution and retribution are two sides of the same coin, both of them being measured and equal. Whereas the idea of reparations is more akin to revenge, where you have the same idea in principle, but without the measures and limitations on them, because you're either dealing with subjects that cannot be measured, or you're dealing with people who do not want to measure. You can't have this in a society, because if you can't have this be measured, you again have a problem that cannot be fixed. And this is why we have our modern day court system, and why the court system has been so very important to the US, and why anything that jeopardizes the court system has been treated as a genuine danger to our nation as a whole. And not just ours, but since we all share similar court systems, anything that could be used as precedent in one system has the capability of being used as precedent in another country's court system if we're similar enough. If the US and Canada have the same laws on a certain subject, one can be brought up as precedent for another. It has happened before. It will continue to happen in the future. Again, big discussion on international law could be another time. If you want me to discuss that, just let me know in the comments. But I'm not going to stay on that one right now. So when we talk about these being pillars of our civilization, you have people that are saying our judicial system, well, pretty much everybody right now says the judicial system is broken. But when you ask them why it's broken, you get not just differing opinions on the matter, you get diametrically opposed opinions. It's not a matter of we could come together in the middle. The system is already in the middle. Flawed, but functional. And people seek instead to either pull it to one side or the other, where it will become more flawed, but beneficial to their side or not. The compromise isn't good enough. The system is broken, and they don't want it fixed. Except they want it fixed in their favor. Now, I want to discuss something. I want to kind of interject here to talk about something that I missed out on a while back. It was a while back when I did the slippery slope and logical progression. I covered many subjects in that. I covered the idea of the homosexual agenda. Not to say there's anything wrong with homosexuals. I certainly don't mind them. And Flame says, at least it isn't guilty until proven innocent. Actually, Flame, you're wrong. I'll get to that later. But just let it be said right now, you're wrong. Anyway, in my stream about logical progression, I talked about the homosexual agenda and how that started back in the 60s and it has progressed to being what it is now, having homosexual drag queens and even predators in places like schools. I talked about abortion and how abortion grew from being a fairly dangerous and illegal procedure back in the 1960s, and for that matter, going as far back as human history. I mean, finding the origins of abortion is impossible, because so long as we have had access to medicinal herbs that could induce things like a miscarriage, we have had abortion. The point that I made in that discussion wasn't the fact that, we suddenly now had this. It's how it went from being something that was incredibly rare to something that was then celebrated. I also covered... What else did I cover? I think I covered the idea of human cannibalism in there too, but I'm not sure. I don't remember, and I don't want to go back and watch all 2 hours of it right now. Then again, that could make my day a lot easier too. I could just, bring the video up and hit play and then, chill for about 2 hours while everybody reviews. That'd be such a high school thing to do. It's like, the teacher has a hangover. We're going to watch a video today. I'll have to save that for someday. Anyway, though, I did that. But there was a subject that I forgot to cover. there was a subject I forgot to cover. And I knew that I wanted to, but I didn't have it written down, and I couldn't remember it at the time. However, I wanted to cover this. This is just a quick little Google search on the MAID Act. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. Some of you may need an explanation. For those of you in the latter category, that's what I'm here for. Now, this is something that started in Canada, I think, but it spread so very quickly that I could not actually tell you where it started in general. The point is, though, even if it did start in Canada, even if it didn't start in Canada, it's in Canada, it's in the US, it's in the UK, it's in Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark, Norway, Amsterdam, Belgium, I think. It's in a lot of places. The MAID Act is right here. Medical assistance in dying. Now, I'm going to let you think about that one for a minute because most people will know this by a different name, generally associated with a different doctor. Any of you that are old enough, and I know I'm old enough, I bet JP's old enough. Sorry if I'm calling you out on that one, but most people will remember this as the Kevorkian Act. Does anybody else but me remember Dr. Kevorkian? Go ahead, put your hands up. I can't see your hands, but you know, just I'm gonna take it on your word that you're putting your hand up. Yeah, see, JP said it, Kevorkian. He knows what I'm talking about. Most people would have called this assisted suicide. Now, much like abortion, assisted suicide is something that goes so far back out in human history that there's no way to measure it. Whether we're talking about ritualistic death in places like the Far East, in places like China, Japan, things like that, we're talking about like the somewhat misunderstood idea that the Inuit or the Eskimos or whoever would just kind of wander off on like an ice floe whenever they got old enough and they were just ready to die. Or we're talking about, you know, somewhat more modern instances in the medieval times where they would go to doctor or family for assistance in just ending their lives. This is something that has been around forever. Now, it became an issue when most of us in Western society started to make laws and such saying that, well, for example, if you are a doctor, you are required by law to do no harm. It's not just an oath that you take. It's literally a law. You cannot do something that is harmful to a patient. The idea is that even if you go into surgery, yes, you are stabbing somebody with a scalpel. You are cutting them open from stem to stern. You are literally vivisecting a person. But the idea is that the damage that you're doing with a scalpel is less than the damage that would be done if you were to do nothing. And in fact, by cutting them open and doing all this damage to them now, they will have a better quality of life afterwards. There needs to be a net positive to whatever you're doing as a doctor. If there is a net negative, you are doing harm. We enshrined this into law and made it so if a doctor did harm, that doctor could be held legally liable. Then you had Dr. Kevorkian, who became very, very famous back in the 1990s in the US because he believed that people should be able to end their own life. And we're not talking about people who were like sad or anything like this. We're talking about people who were in like stage 4 cancer, okay? They're dying. People who have debilitating AIDS, Or maybe they have Parkinson's and they're no longer able to get around on their own, to survive on their own. Maybe all they can do is move their thumb. People who wanted to go out on their own terms. People who just wanted to die. It was legally not allowed. Dr. Kevorkian, however, believed that he had a moral grounds to do this and a moral obligation as a doctor to aid these people in what he called treatment. It's what the patient wanted. And so, regardless of the law, and usually with the full expressed approval of the families, he would go through and, as JP said, he would either set them up with a system so that they could end their own life, or if they were too far gone and could not do it themselves, he would do it for them. If we wanted to be absolutely the least generous we could, Dr. Kevorkian is one of the greatest serial killers in U.S. history. The only difference being, all of his victims asked him to. And Dr. Kevorkian, I do believe, is still in prison. Hold on, let me look this up. Let me look this up. Dr. Kevorkian? Yeah. Current status. Jack Kevorkian, audacious Mythican pathologist, dubbed Dr. Death. Oh! He died. When did he die? Hold on. Go away. Stupid ad. No, I don't. Just go. Wow. Okay, never mind. He died at 83 years old. This article's June 3rd, 2011. Wow. Okay. I'm off by 1 or 2 or 12 years. Okay, well, that happened. My bad. Okay, he's definitely not in jail anymore. So, that's actually really, really awful. The fact is that he's dead now. He died in prison. That's horrifying because of what we're about to discuss right now. See, Dr. Kevorkian went to prison because he ended people's lives. Fast forward a while, though. In some places, like Canada, where they have a different kind of medical system, they had much more lax laws. Like, the idea of medically assisted suicide was never outright illegal, as far as I know, in Canada, as well as in places like Sweden, I believe. These things were never really made outright illegal because they didn't really happen on a scale where you needed to deal with it. Now you have to understand that, like, Sweden has a population of 12. So nobody really cares what they do. And Canada may be one of the largest nations in the world. However, the entire population of Canada basically lives in a stripe along the U.S. border where it's still warm. So their population isn't exactly that much. The U.S., on the other hand, has a population of 375 million people. It is massive. And so if you were to talk about even a 0.5% of the U.S. population, that'd be a lot of people. Anything that happens in the U.S. is usually really obvious. It's kind of less obvious in other countries. So you have these other countries that we're talking about how people who are in late-stage disease or who are already dying and want to go on their own terms, this kind of thing should maybe be available to them. And it happens so rarely that no one really paid it much mind. This wasn't really a big deal until it was. because what we noticed is that during the whole COVID pandemic thing, that I'm not going to give a whole lot of credit to, everything had a microscope put on it. And one of the things that happened was these things, because generally speaking, if you were in Canada and this was going to happen, it would usually be a very small thing. You would have family around, you'd have a doctor around, everything would be administered properly and in doses. People would be able to say their goodbyes, and they would be able to be there with their family as it was done. As it should be, in my opinion, but we're not here for my opinions. What happened during COVID is that because of all the different rules and restrictions, these things didn't stop happening, but people were denied the ability to be with family as it did happen. That made the news. And as it made the news, well, this kind of brought the entire idea of assisted suicide back into the mainstream. It dredged up that old conversation. Now, having 20 years of more progressive social values is going to do something to that conversation. We're talking like an entire generation and a half of people who, well, as in like I think Flame mentioned when we brought up Kevorkian, he just said, "Who?" Yeah, lots of people don't even know who Kevorkian is nowadays. In fact, if you were to walk down the street and just ask people, most people probably wouldn't have an idea. You'd probably be able, if you were to ask the people and write down people's ages, you'd probably be able to find a nice little cutoff where people either do or don't know who Dr. Kevorkian was or what the assisted suicide debate even was. So, you have a new generation in, much more socially progressive. And the idea of assisted suicide now, it's actually being more accepted. Which is good. I think this is not a bad thing to have around. However, and I've had this discussion with other people, I have a problem with it. Now, I realize that's a bit contradictory after what I just said about, being in support of it. But if I remember back to what I said about the slippery slope, I had said that all of these things that were tolerated, it was quickly pushed from tolerance to acceptance. Once it was accepted, then it wanted to be acknowledged. Then it wanted to be celebrated. Then it wanted to be demanded. Now, the reason why I really regret not putting this discussion in the previous video on this is because when it comes to assisted suicide, it started off with the idea that if you were at the end of your life and you just wanted to end things on your own terms, I think you should be able to. Most people think you should be able to. However, I pointed out that there's a danger here. If we allow this, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but if we do, and if people are not allowed to moderate themselves, what are you going to have next? You're going to have a person who's going to be 84 years old in renal failure. Okay? And they want to die. They do not want to go through dialysis. They don't want to wait for a transplant that may add another 2 years onto their life. Even if they could get the transplant, which at 84 years old, let's face it, no one is going to give them a transplant. They don't want to be on dialysis for the rest of their life. They just want to go. No one's going to say no to that. What about a 74-year-old individual with the same condition? Again, end-stage renal failure. We're looking at dialysis for the rest of their life. At 74 years old, even in good health, the idea of getting a donor kidney, not great. What about 64 years old? Maybe. Maybe they could get a transplant. I do believe that the average kidney transplant usually lasts for about 20 years, I think, give or take. So they might get it. Maybe. What about 54? What about 44? And what if you you have a 44-year-old who they say, you know what? You have everything we need for the transplant. However, we brought up your case to the panel of doctors because all these things are decided by panel. And the doctors have decided that given that you have several tattoos, this shows a pattern of behavior that may mean that you may not stick to the appropriate health regime needed to maintain the proper environment for a donor kidney. We're just concerned because if there's any chance that it won't happen, then we don't want to waste a kidney. Kidneys are rare. So what if it's a 44-year-old and the doctor panel says no, meaning that this person is going to be stuck on dialysis until one of two things happens. Either they finally get a green light for a kidney, or they just die. Is that the kind of life that people want to live? Would you want to live that way? We're talking about a 44-year-old person who got a bad hand, and they don't want to live on dialysis for the rest of their life. Do we accept that? I'm not going to give you a yes or no because you're going to have to answer that question for yourself. Okay? So what if we take one more step and say, all right, so maybe the 44-year-old can be a candidate for MAID, medical assistance in dying. What if it's not end-stage renal failure? What if it's just... Oh, and JP says, or Bones gives him a pill. You get out of here with that. No. You go away now. Anyway, what if we're not talking end-stage renal failure? What if they just have one kidney that's failing? Okay? And because they have one kidney that's failing, they're going to have to spend the rest of their life with one kidney. They're going to have a restricted diet because, you know, with only one kidney, you can't tax it too much. You can absolutely live with one kidney. You can live a full life with one kidney. Many people do. In fact, I mean, if you donate a kidney, you will spend the rest of your life with one kidney. And you can be just fine, but you can't do things like drink too much. You don't want to overtax your remaining kidney. And Flame says, obviously, I would prefer a cybernetic replacement. We can't do cybernetic kidneys yet. Like, there are many artificial implants that we can use for organs. Like, we can get you an artificial heart, but we cannot replicate the complexity of a human kidney yet. Kidneys are super complicated. Like, you don't even know. You don't even know. Like, we can't even develop a material to replicate the function of the loops of Henle. No, we can't do it yet. They are working on it. We need to work on semi-permeable materials that can be used to replicate, like, the loops of Henle that will be able to draw out things like urea from the bloodstream. But it's super hard work. Anyway, though, so we're moving on now to a patient who's only got one kidney. Okay? Now, with one kidney, what if they decide that they're on like a special diet and they don't want to have to live like this anymore? Maybe they really like their drinking, okay? And they had to give it up for the transplant, but they just don't want to live like this anymore. Is this person also a candidate for MAID? And we're going to keep taking these steps, you know, one step at a time. Now let me pull up this news article here. Let's see. That is not the way I wanted to look that up. Here it is. Ah, here we go, in the Psychiatric Times. So we talked about how we had an older page, and we'd kind of aged them backwards. But they still had like a terminal disease. Then we said, what if the disease was less and less terminal? Okay? Now I want to bring up an article here. This is from the Psychiatric Times. This is from June 7th of 2021. New Canadian law allows for assisted suicide for patients with psychiatric disorders. I'm not going to read the entire article. You can look it up on your own if you want to. Point is that if you are suffering from depression or anxiety or any number of these things, if you're, say, an agoraphobic or anything of that degree, anything that would consider you to have a psychological issue that is worthy of being considered a disability would qualify you for maid service in Canada. And not just in Canada. There was a case of a 29-year-old woman, I think it was over in Switzerland or Belgium, who was suffering from clinical depression and was able to get assisted suicide. 29 years old, absolutely nothing wrong with her except for depression. And this was allowed. We have strayed very, very far from where we were in talking about elderly patients with end-of-life diseases to now people who are fully functional and just needed a little bit of help. This is where we're at now. And we have somebody new in the chat that I'd never seen. Unknown Boy. I have no idea. You are very much unknown. But it's good to have you here. Anyway, the reason why I bring this up, because this is where we're at now. But where does it go from here? Is there any reason why we would not see this continuing on? If we already have people who are in their 20s with depression being offered the ability to get medically assisted suicide, what about younger? What if instead of 20s, what if we go to teens? Okay, what if we just take one step? What if instead of 20s, what if it's teens? What if instead of it being a person with depression in their, or clinical depression in their 20s, what if it's just, seasonal depression in their 20s? It's always one small step at a time. It's miles by inches. This is a problem. It is a problem that I want to bring us back now to the center of this discussion. The system is broken. When we were discussing assisted suicide during the Kevorkian trials back in the 90s, it was never an issue that Kevorkian was going to young men and women who were in perfect health, physically at least, or even just, minorly afflicted, like they had a bad knee or a bad back or something like this. We were not talking about people who were otherwise fine except for maybe a few small things, and setting them up to end their lives. And yet somehow we have gone from putting Dr. Kevorkian into prison to now going far beyond anything that he would have ever imagined, and if he were still alive today, anything that he would have tolerated. And we have somebody else in the chat, grow more facts. I'm trying to grow facts here, but hopefully with you here, I can grow a few more. So with Kevorkian gone, we've gone so far beyond that it paled. What he did just pales in comparison. Now, this is very important on its own. But I want to bring something up. And this is going to sound a bit cliche, I know. But I want to take a little bit of a trip back into history. So, we're going to go back to... Actually, this looks pretty good. Let's try this. Oh, I don't read German. So, we're going to take a look at this. Hold on. We're going full Nazi on this one. I'm sorry, but just buckle up. Way back in the 1930s in Germany, a little-known group called the Nazis took power. And as they were rebuilding Germany after the destruction of the Treaty of Versailles, they started to institute a whole bunch of new policies. After all, they were rebuilding Germany to be an industrial superpower now. That meant that they needed fully capable and fully able people to rebuild Germany. Also, we have another new person that is Ghanshem? Go Heal. I have no idea how to pronounce that, so I'm sorry if I'm butchering it, but hello, I'm glad to have you here. And Flame says, Jowl, I'm German. I'm German too, but not German enough to know what that even means. So, during the 1930s, while they were taking power, before we had death camps, before we had concentration camps, before the Jews were being touched, before the blacks or any of those people were being touched, there was something that happened before all of that that would have, or should have been a red flag to most of the world, and most of the world ignored it. And we have proof that the rest of the world knew what was going on. So we're just kind of going to breeze through this. On July 14th, 1933, the Nazi government instituted the Law for the Prevention of Progeny with Hereditary Diseases. Oh, Flame says he grew up in Germany. Ekin Disprach. Yeah, I've never been to Germany, but my family on my mother's side, 3 generations back, so my great-grandparents were 100% full-blooded German. I never got to meet them, but my mother told me stories about when she was a kid. It was a German household because her grandparents literally did not know English. So my grandmother is half German and knew German. My mother knew a little bit of German, and I only know a few words and phrases. So I can't really get a whole lot there. Chromorphax says, I am Indian. I think that may be like one of the few things I don't have. I have so many various different bloodlines in me, it's kind of crazy. But I'm not willing to give up my DNA for like a 23andMe, so. Anyway, July 14th, 1933, the Law for the Prevention of Progeny with Hereditary Diseases. This law, one of the first steps taken by the Nazis toward their goal of creating the Aryan master race, called for the sterilization of all persons who suffered from diseases considered hereditary, such as mental illness, learning disabilities, physical deformity, epilepsy, blindness, which, by the way, I only have one working eye, so I'd be on this list. Deafness and severe alcoholism. With the law's passage, the Third Reich also stepped up its propaganda against people with disabilities, regularly labeling them life unworthy of life or useless eaters and highlighting their burden upon society. Just a few years later, the persecution of people with disabilities escalated even further. Autumn of 1939, he secretly authorized the medically administered program of Mercy Death, codenamed Operation T4, in reference to the address of the program's Berlin's headquarters in I have no damn idea. Hold on, I have to get a drink. You can just stare at that word and let it, like, melt your brain. Can I know your name? No, you cannot. Sorry, not sharing. I do have a German last name, though. Which is funny because, like, nobody can pronounce it. So, yeah. I'm sure that most people understand the burden of growing up like that. Constantly having your name mispronounced. However, I can tell you what I wasn't named. So my last name is German. My first name was not the name that my parents wanted to give me. Somebody else got to give my first name, but my first name was supposed to be Gustav. To give you an idea of what kind of family I grew up in. Thank God I am not a Gustav. I do not want to be one. However, I would be named after a really big-ass cannon, so I mean, that would be kind of fun. Flame says, Tiergarten Strace? Is that it? Tiergartenstrasse? I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not good with German. German is really hard. Japanese really... I wonder which would be more hard to learn, German or Japanese? Because I tried Japanese, and Japanese is super hard. Anyway, we're getting distracted. Between 1940 and 1941, approximately 70,000 Austrian and German disabled people were killed under the T4 program, most via large-scale killing operations using poison gas. This methodology served as the precursor to the streamlined extermination methods and the final solution. Don't need to go into a whole lot more than that. Point is, we know what the Germans were doing. They basically looked at people who had some kind of disability or something like that and said, these are people who have difficulties functioning in society, and we're going to get rid of them. Now, why do I bring this up? Again, as with everything else that I was discussing before, where we go from tolerating something to accepting it to then celebrating it and then demanding it. When it comes to assisted suicide, we are tolerating it now. And we're tolerating it to a degree that pretty much anybody who wants to can get it. As a matter of fact, I would dare say that we're either on the cusp between tolerance and acceptance, or we may already be in acceptance. Possibly teetering a little bit on celebration, because the people who are running these services, they're putting out commercials for this kind of thing. One of the things that came out a while ago, I don't know if I could find it. Let me see if I can actually find it. Let me go ahead and dim that for a minute. That's a... No. I can't actually find it. Yes, I understand. Hold on a second. Okay, so this is from somebody else's YouTube channel. This is the Candace Owens podcast. But if they're covering it, then I'll use it. So let's see. Scroll. And I'm not turning the sound on. Oh, here we go. I remember seeing this commercial a while back, but I'm not turning the sound on. Just All you need to know is that this is a commercial for a woman who said that she wanted to die, she wanted to go out on her own terms, everything else. And so they did an entire TV spot for this, showing how that she would be surrounded by friends and family and everything else. If I pause here, yeah, for Jennifer, June 1985 to October 2022. And so this was kind of like her little montage to go out on. And I'm not even going to turn this off. I'm just going to go back to where I was. So I don't know what you want to call that. If you want to call that acceptance or celebration of the subject. But either way, we're there. So at what point do we simply go from it's out there, we're pushing it, to now we're demanding it? And so we just covered that. I want to bring up this case, or this news story from Canada, again, because it's all coming out of Canada. This is an after-the-fact story. Wait, why is this here? Copy, close, paste, there. So this is from December 20th of 2022, because caseworker accused of offering veteran-assisted death no longer works for Veterans Affairs, says department. What had happened was, in Canada, a veteran from the military, I assume, was calling in for something. I don't remember what it was. And I don't know if they're going to offer it here. I don't know. The point is that a veteran had called into Veterans Affairs for whatever the reason was. And the thing that was offered, instead of some kind of financial help, instead of some kind of medical help or therapy or whatever it was, the caseworker who was on the phone instead suggested maid service for the veteran. Blizz says it's help with PTSD, and Blizz being Canadian, I'm going to take it. I'm American, therefore I am dumb. So it was help with PTSD, so probably some kind of therapy to work with, and instead the caseworker offered maid assistance. This is literally the case of somebody who is potentially a useless eater being shown the outdoor. How much longer do we go until the maid service is either accepted as a method to deal with it, or is simply the only method? Now, in this case, the caseworker was let go. They will not identify the person, though. They won't say if they resigned or if they were fired, so we don't actually know what was going on there. All we do know is that the person who did it is actually being protected. There will be no further repercussions against them. There's going to be no retaliation, no retribution against them. Not from the public, not from private individuals, not from anybody, apparently. Because they're just going to kind of be swept off to the side and swept under the rug. It's going to go away. JP says, let's hope it doesn't become a prescription. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I am talking about it becoming a prescription. See, they pushed it. They pushed it a little bit too far, but how long is it going to take for somebody to say, perhaps maybe this is an option we can look into? I am going to get completely conspiratorial here. I'm going to get completely conspiratorial here. And YouTube, you have to understand, this is my conspiracy theory. I am not asserting facts. This is my own theory on a subject. It is my personal opinion, and I will not be punished for my opinion. This is not misinformation, it is opinion. I'm going to say that as many times as I have to make sure that this gets across. During the COVID times in places like New York and Pennsylvania and Michigan and many other states, they had moved people with COVID because they said that the hospitals were overloaded into nursing homes. This is not something that was a secret. Also, Vraj Patel says hi. I say hi back. Glad to have you here. Anyway, they had moved patients into nursing homes, saying that they needed additional facilities for holding people. The end result of this, and this is not up for debate, is there were massive outbreaks of COVID in various senior centers and elderly care facilities across the country. The death toll was high, as in like tens of thousands. Now, we can debate the reason why people did it all day long. I have a suspicion, however, I have nothing to back this up, but I have a suspicion that some of these states looked at this as an opportunity. After all, when you look at the primary benefactors of public services, who do they tend to be? Whether it is medical, whether it is transportation, whether it is living assistance or such things, it tends to be the elderly. And I do think that perhaps, although nobody will ever admit it, and nobody can ever prove it, I do firmly believe that this was used as an opportunity to skim the top off of those bills. And when we see things like a caseworker offering maid service to a veteran, I do believe that it falls in that same vein, and in fact may even go so far as to give credibility to the other conspiracy theory. The point is that we have gone far, far down. And Vraj Patel says, what are we teaching? I am actually discussing the concept of the black pill today as a online philosophy, as a social philosophy, and the applications and implications of that. Right now, we're talking about how broken systems operate in Western society and how they are becoming more broken over time and further unfixable. Which is where I wanted to bring this back to our conversation about the black pill in general. We have a working medical system in Western countries. To different levels and degrees, yes, but every Western country has a public medical system of some kind. With the understanding that medical systems are supposed to take care of people to do no harm. But now what we see is a medical system that is in fact being used to do harm. Whether it is offering maid service to people who objectively don't need it, or whether it is the abuse of medical procedures under, say, emergency acts to achieve a goal that would be the antithesis of what the medical system was there for. Either way, we can agree that the system is broken. And how do we fix it? In this case, how would we fix it? Well, we would fix it by holding those people accountable and reversing many of the changes that have been done. The problem, of course, with doing that is the opposition. You have people who are actually demanding that things like maid service are a human right. Their argument is not necessarily without merit. The ability to end your own life should be a human right. It is your life to do with as you please. The degree to which we do this, however, or at least how much we accept, should be debated. It should not necessarily be an all or nothing thing, similar to the abortion discussion. It does not have to be an all or nothing affair. It can be limited, it can be restricted, it can be moderated. After all, moderation has always been the key. As I mentioned earlier when I discussed the courts, maybe they're flawed, but they are functional. They're as equal as they can possibly be without favoring one side or another. Or at least that's the idea of it. But now when we look at the medical system and where it's going, it's broken, and how do we fix it? So we have discussed education, we have discussed medicine, we've discussed several things now. I want to get into some current events. And this is going to come as no surprise to anybody, because this has literally been like the single topic of conversation for the last week. So of course I got to talk about it here. I mean, everybody else has. Of course, everybody knows, at least everybody who's not been living under a rock, that earlier this week, the district attorney in Manhattan, New York, filed a 34-count felony indictment against the former president, Donald Trump. If this is somehow a surprise to you, please tell me where you live so that I can move in with you for like a month out of the year and just take a break for a while. The point is that he has brought up multiple charges against Trump. He has indicted him, and many people are saying that this singular action of charging the former president with these charges is going to damage the U.S. legal and justice system beyond repair. Now, of course, anybody who is a Trump supporter or is a conservative in general is going to believe this. But we've even heard this from people who are opposed to Trump. And why is that? Well, I think we want to discuss this right here. And we need to discuss this by discussing what happened, and more importantly, the further implications of this. Now, without getting too far into the weeds, I'm not going to go through all the details here. Needless to say, the basics are this. Attorney Bragg filed 34 felony counts. Now, what were the counts? Almost every single count, in fact, I do think they were all. I think it literally was every single count was falsifying business records in the third degree. Now, what does that mean? Basically, he screwed up his bookkeeping. Falsifying business records in the first degree is a misdemeanor in almost every single circumstance. 99 times out of 100, it would be a misdemeanor offense. It would be a fine at the most. However, these are being charged as felonies. Why is that? Well, here's the example that I've been giving to many people. What Attorney Bragg told us when he gave his press conference is that the charges themselves are indeed a misdemeanor. However, a misdemeanor committed in service of a felony can also be charged as a felony. That's a bit of a legalistic discussion. Let me make that simpler for you. Most people know what trespassing is. Trespassing is really simple. You're just walking somewhere where you shouldn't be. For example, if instead of walking along the sidewalk, you walk across somebody's front lawn instead, technically speaking, that would be trespassing. And most of us would agree that that is a slap on the wrist at most. Literally, grab their hand, slap their hand, tell them don't do it again. What most people don't understand is burglary. Now, burglary is different from trespassing. Burglary does not mean theft. Okay? Most people get those two things confused, but you can be a burglar and not a thief. Burglary simply means that you have entered into a place by force usually. Even if that is the most minimal force, like opening a closed door, you have used your force to enter it, that you are not allowed to be in. The difference here is that trespassing just requires you to be notified that something belongs to somebody else. So, for example, a front lawn that has been neatly edged out is obviously in front of a house. It obviously belongs to that house. It is separate from the sidewalk. It has a driveway on either side of it, one being the neighbor's, one being that one, or the driveway for the house. It is very obvious this front yard and the driveway next to it are part of this house. But there's no fence, there's no barrier, no nothing. You just walk across it. That's trespassing. And yes, you can accidentally trespass. It happens. Burglary requires that you actually take an action, meaning that if you were to cross the yard and then open the front door of the house and enter, you are now burgling, which is just a really fun word to say. You should try it. But because you had to open the door to breach the barrier of the house, you are now burgling. And burglary can be a misdemeanor, can be a felony. I don't know what the difference is. But we're going to say in this case, it would be a felony burglary. The problem is that with the Trump indictment, all of these things, or all of these counts of business records, are misdemeanors, and it's being said that they were committed in service of a felony. When pressed about this by the News Corps, Bragg said that he does not need to tell anybody. In fact, he doesn't even need to identify what the felony was. Just that it was in service of a felony, whether it was successful or not. And he can charge these misdemeanors as felonies. If we go back to our trespassing argument, this means that I would be able to charge a person with felony trespassing just because I'm implying that they trespassed on the front lawn to enter the house. Not that they did, not that I can prove they did, not that I can even suggest that they might have tried, but simply because I have inferred it, I can now charge the trespassing as a felony. This is the core of the indictment of Donald Trump, and the reason why so many people have a problem with it. In addition, the 34 counts is really because his attorney that was supposedly involved in this was on a monthly retainer. So every month that he paid his attorney after this supposed event was charged as additional charge. That's how we got to 34. Not very important. The most important part is that there's actually no felony here, and it's all very, very wishy-washy. It's important to understand that so that we can discuss the system itself, because you have to remember, going back to our black pill, the system is broken and cannot be fixed. Now, why is this important right now? The big thing that people have been talking about with this indictment is that it has thrown out over 200 years of precedent. The idea being that the person in charge of the country may, in the course of their duty, have to do things that are not nice. They are not clean. They are not pretty. and at some points, may even be illegal in the strictest sense. Biden abandoned an entire Air Force base of hardware over in Afghanistan and put hundreds of millions of dollars of military hardware into the hands of Al-Qaeda. I'm pretty sure that might have broken a law somewhere. I don't know where it would be in the books, but I'm pretty sure it broke a law somewhere. Trump and Obama both loved their drone bombs. Obama especially loved using drones to drop bombs in civilian areas, including killing an American civilian who had committed no crime except being the son of somebody who was preaching anti-American things in Muslim countries. Didn't kill him, managed to kill his son though. George Bush, of course, waged war in like 4 or 5 different countries during his presidential term. And we can keep going back further and further until we eventually get back to George Washington, who literally led a murderous revolution against another country. And probably did other bad things during his presidential term, I don't know. The point being that if we're going to hold every single leader accountable for all the stuff they do, then we're going to end up with one of 2 things. Number 1, every single leader that gets elected will basically be arrested within the first week of their presidency. Or we're going to end up with leaders who are so terrified of ending up in prison either during or after their presidency that we will end up with leaders who are so hamstrung that they will do literally nothing at all, ever. Hence why we have had a tacit agreement that we're just not going to do it. That tacit agreement has been thrown out now. And by the way, if they can do it to a president, they can do it to anyone. They can do it to a representative. They can do it to a judge. They can do it to anybody in civil service. Again, if they can do it to the president, anybody who works for the government, whether it is somebody in the cabinet of the president or it's your local postal carrier. Anybody is now on the table. And if they can do it to anybody in the government, then any civilian is an even easier target. There have already been concerns that the justice system has been unduly and irrevocably weaponized before this happened. The idea of a judge is supposed to be somebody who is impartial to either side, somebody who is knowledgeable in the law, who will interpret the law, listen to arguments, and determine on which side of the law does somebody fall, either abiding by or violating. The minute that an opinion sneaks its way in there, it is no longer an unbiased system. Now, as we said before, nothing is perfect. That would be a perfect court, but nothing is ever perfect because everything is subject to entropy. Everything falls apart. Even the most perfect judge in the world will not remain so if they remain on the bench for long enough. It's impossible. But just because it's flawed doesn't mean that it can't stay there in the middle for as long as we can keep it there. What's happened is that it's no longer in the middle. It has strayed to one side or another depending on where you go to such a degree that the courts don't work. The fact is, and many attorneys will tell you this, if you look at the various courts, especially the circuit courts across the US, you can generally predict how a trial will come, or how a trial will be ruled, just based on where the courthouse is located. If it's located in New York, you know how it's going to rule. If it's located in Texas, you know how it's going to rule. If it's located in Florida or California, you know how it's going to rule. If it's in DC, you know how it's going to rule. The very fact that the location of the church, or not the church, although it may as well be, the location of the court tells you everything you need to know about the court, tells you everything you need to know about the judge. The system is broken and cannot be fixed. How do you fix it? First off, most judges are usually appointed for life on a certain level. Many of them do have to be voted in, so always watch your local elections. Be sure to vote, for what good that does you these days. But be sure to make sure you vote in your local elections, because local elections are very important. The point is that on up to a certain level, they do seem to work. Above that level, they're utterly broken. And they're broken because people are not necessarily interested in fixing it. As I said, people see the court in the middle. They acknowledge that the court is not perfect. And so their response is to grab one side of the court and try to pull it to their side, where they believe it's better, it's fixed. Of course, you have the other side who's doing the exact opposite. They're grabbing the other side of the court and trying to pull it to their side. The end result is that if you keep pulling on it in both directions, well, you can't rip the court in half, so it's going to wiggle back and forth. Today it'll be more fair to this side. Tomorrow it'll be more fair to that side. And when I say today and tomorrow, we could be talking about years. It's not going to be fixed. And the reason it cannot be fixed is because you have people that are pulling on it. In order to fix it, we would have to stop pulling on it and to let it just operate. But what happens if you stop pulling? If you stop pulling on it, what's going to happen to the court? It's going to go all the way to the other side. Because there's no reason for them to stop pulling. Why would they? And if they were to let go and stop pulling, would you? I mean, many of us would like to think that we would, but also you have to understand that as I stated before, we're in the middle of a religious war. The other side, the woke side, firmly believes that we exist to destroy everything that they want to build, to keep them from building anything, and to put them down. And if we exist to destroy everything that they want to build, why would they stop at nothing less to put us down? Similarly, we also, on the conservative side, believe that if these people were to remain unchecked, they would absolutely either indoctrinate us by force through re-education and such things, or they would wipe us out. And they have said as much. Not as a whole, but there are groups of them who have said that they would like to do so. There is no fixing it, because there's no interest in coming back together to fix it. The system is broken, and it's only going to get worse. So as I pointed out with the idea of logical progression, and as we discussed with the idea of maid service being not just accepted, but celebrated and pushed to a point where in 10 years, if we continue down this path, we could end up in a Nazi-esque era where maid service is not just prescribed for people who have certain disorders, but it could be prescribed and then administered. As in, not only does this person have a disability, not only is maid service available, but we're no longer giving you the option to say no. This is the prescription, and you will be medicated accordingly. We see this in the trans debate. And I suppose this is a good time to get into that too, because as we have seen, as we speak about the system being broken and it's not able to be fixed, many of us heard about or followed the Nashville shooting. I'm just going to bring this up again. Well, not again. This is the first time I brought this up now. But the 2023 Covenant School shooting. Everybody heard about this. This made news across the world because it was horrible. I don't actually want to talk about this, though. I just want this to be here as a reference. Because after this happened, and after the person who was shooting up the school was killed, the trans activists inside the woke religion on the other side said that this person was a victim. They were a victim of circumstance, they were a victim of the school, they were a victim of conservatives, they were a victim of many, many other things. They were definitely not a victim, of course, of the fact that they went to a school with a gun. But they said this person was a victim of literally everything, and this was the only way that they could lash out. This is the only action they had left to them. I don't want to talk about this, though, because what I do want to talk about are what happened afterwards. They declared a, quote, trans day of rage that was supposed to take place over the April 1st weekend. And when they talked about the Trans Day of Rage, they weren't exactly being subtle about it. There were calls to get arms. Rifles, pistols, melee weapons such as knives and bats. There were targets that had been designated. Schools, churches, government buildings, homes of prominent legislatures, governors, mayors, things like that. There were battle plans made, there were maps drawn up, there were parties that were assembled, and it went nowhere because they found out very quickly that when you post this kind of stuff on the internet, the FBI tends to show up. And so the Trans Day of Rage was kind of called off, and they said, yeah, that was facetious. We weren't actually serious about doing any of that. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of went by the wayside. What happened later on, though? Well, it was 2 days ago, I believe. There's not a whole lot of news about this because nothing happened, and nothing happened because in Florida, there was another person who was going to shoot up a school. I don't remember what kind of school it was, but I believe it was in southern Florida, not in the Panhandle. But there was another trans person that was going to shoot up an area. I believe, if I remember the story right, it was their mother that got wind of it. And after getting wind of it, called the police. The police showed up and were able to stop anything before it happened. It was a spark that got snuffed out. So I think they were arrested. I don't think that anybody was hurt, not even the person who was going to do the shooting. It all ended. Similarly, on the same day, there was another one in Colorado. Another person who was going to shoot something up. I think it was like a mall or something, but I don't remember. But another person had called it, or no, wait. This person did themselves in by posting about it online. And so when local police got wind of it, again, they showed up to take care of it. Then, after that, let's see. This happened just yesterday. And please, no audio in this stupid video. So Riley Gaines, outspoken critic of transgender athletes, says she was attacked during the event at SFSU. Okay, can I pause this? Because I don't even want to see it. Point is that this happened just yesterday. It was a female swimmer who was speaking out against having trans females, in other words, biological men, competing in women's sports. The end result of this, however, was that she had to be removed from the building by security officers. And she had to be removed by security because the entire protesting crowd decided to assault her. Now, just so we're clear on our terminology, assault and battery are two different things. Assault is the attempt to harm somebody. Battery is if you actually do. If I swing at you, I have assaulted you. If I hit you, I have battered you. Hence why you can be charged with assault and battery. You're kind of stacking charges at that point, but you can be charged with assault and battery. So, as far as I know, she was not battered getting out of there, but the entire crowd did assault. They tried to get hands on her. They shouted things at her. It was a verbal assault. But they did everything they could to harass and assault her as she was removed from the area. This is 3 separate events of the trans people coming out and attacking after having already a school shooting done by a trans person. Why is this important? I've had to explain this to other people too. It's important for a reason. The Trans Day of Rage was organized because, according to the people on the left, according to the people who are trans, what they are facing is nothing less than a genocide. Or maybe it was a Trans Day of Revenge, I'm not sure. Or wait, this might be something different. Either way, I don't have the page up for it right now. And I don't have time to look for it either. The point is that what they say they're facing is a genocide. Because of laws that are going through in places like Tennessee, in places like Florida, Texas, basically conservative areas that are saying no more gender treatment for children. That means no more hormone treatments, no more surgical treatments. And in fact, they're pushing things like therapies for people who say that they are, in fact, trans. Because while transgenderism is a thing and does happen, it's a bit like attention deficit disorder. It doesn't happen at the numbers that people say it's happening. And it is, in fact, highly overprescribed. The implication, however, on the left is that this is simply a way to get rid of trans people the same way that conservatives thought that they could use pray away the gay camps and shock therapy to get rid of homosexuals. Which is, of course, just, if you're going to send your people to a pray away the gay camp, that's just one step away from a concentration camp, isn't it? And you know what? I might even be generous enough to give them that argument. But it's not happening. While these camps did exist and, people were sent to them, as far as I know, nothing bad ever came out of it. If something bad did come out of it, I haven't heard of it. The important thing here is that they do believe that they are facing some kind of genocide, or they're on the very cusp of it. The trans movement in Western culture right now, particularly in the US, but to lesser degrees in the rest of the Western countries, firmly believe that they are essentially the Jews in 1930s Germany. Nobody's come for them yet, but you can see the dominoes falling into place. The interesting thing about that argument, however, is that it's not unique to them. The interesting news that I got this week is there's an actress named Gina Carano. I don't know what she does, but I know that she's from the show The Mandalorian, which is very popular, and I've never seen an episode of it and probably never will. But she recently went back to Disney because she was fired from Disney. And she was fired from Disney because she came out and stated that the way conservatives in the US are treated these days also seems very similar to the way the Jews were treated in the early 1930s of Germany. That is to say, if you were Jewish in Germany, you were not allowed to do certain things. You could not participate in public service. You could not hold office. Few Jews were even allowed to do things like own their own stores. You were not allowed to be influential. You couldn't have a radio show. You couldn't donate to political parties. You could not do anything because they did not want Jews to have power in any way, shape, or form. And what do we see now? There have been increasing pushes, especially in the United States, also to a lesser degree in Canada, to remove conservatives from different positions of power and authority. There have been moves to remove conservative judges from certain benches in certain districts, to remove conservatives from committees and councils in places like the House of Representatives and in the Senate. There have been efforts to remove conservative parents from things like school boards and PTA meetings. There have been efforts to keep conservatives, or just conservative-leaning people, out of any places of political power that they can get them out of. And Gina Carano said that this is very, very reminiscent of what happened in Germany, and it should be concerning to anyone who can see it happening. As we can see here, both of us are looking at the same system. We both see the same country and the same institutions. And we both have absolutely dipole perspectives of it. Each side believes that there is no compromise in the middle, that the other side is trying to wipe out their own side. There can be no coming back together here to fix it, because no matter what the evidence is in the middle, and this is why I went back to the idea of a religious war in the West right now, there is no evidence to really support this, but it is belief. We see people being removed from one thing or another, and we assume that this is evidence of a greater thing going on. It may be. It also may not be. At this point, it doesn't actually matter because it's in the past. Nobody cares about that anymore. Nobody wants to discuss it anymore. All that matters now is how do we get rid of the other side. The system is broken, and it cannot be fixed. It cannot be fixed because nobody wants to fix it. So, where does that leave us now? I mean, this is the black pill. This is what I have you here for. Whether it is social, whether it is political, whether it is economic. Economic, we didn't even talk about that one. Whether it is in the US, whether it is in Canada, whether it's in Britain or the Western European countries, let's talk about the economy. How about a show of hands here? Who thinks the economy is doing really good right now? Because I'll tell you, I don't think it is. Do you think it's doing good right now? I might give the chat a minute to catch up, but I don't think it's doing very good right now. We've seen the dollar weakening, whether it be the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, the British pound, whatever it is that they use in Germany. I'm sure that's going down. Well, no, they all use euros now. They don't have their own currencies anymore. I forgot about that. Is the euro down? I don't know if the euro's down or not lately. I don't follow that. But most Western economies are going down. But what's interesting is that if you ask me, or I'm sure most of the people in my chat who will agree probably that it's going down, if you ask some people who are on the left, they think the economy is doing great. They think that it's getting better every day. You don't have to go very far to find President Biden telling the country that these are some of the best numbers of our lives, and that things are only getting better from here. And you have to ask yourself, how is that possible? We can look at the graphs. We can look at the charts. We can follow the numbers. And they'll give you a dozen different excuses for why the numbers are wrong. I mean, maybe the polling was done improperly. The fact is that we're both looking at the same graph. One side says that things are getting better. One side says things are getting worse. It's one graph. You cannot get two opposite opinions out of one chart. That's not the chart being broken, however. It's the society being broken. The society is broken and cannot be fixed. The system is broken and cannot be fixed. And it cannot be fixed because nobody wants to fix it. Or rather, there are a lot of people that do want to fix it. But we all acknowledge that we can't fix it together because we can't work together. And this is the essence of the black pill right now. And this is why everything right now is bad. And I'm here to tell you that everything is bad and it's going to get so much worse. Whether it's this year or next year or 5 years down the road, things are going to get a whole lot worse. What we have going on right now is only the tip of the iceberg. But in order to keep entropy from taking over, you have to continuously feed energy into a system. And you have some people on one side who are trying to keep the system going. They're feeding energy into it, trying to keep the lights on. You have another group of people who are feeding an equal or greater amount of energy into it, trying to make it degrade even faster. Basically, the house is on fire. You have one group of people that are throwing water and one group of people that are throwing gas. I got news for you. It doesn't really matter who's throwing more. At the end of the day, the house is still going to be gone. That is the black pill. And by the way, it's not just going to affect the US. It's not just going to affect Canada. It's going to affect the entire world. We are all in the same boat together. We are all going to sink or swim together. I'm sure that China's sitting over there saying, yes, the US is crumbling. Soon it's going to be our time for world domination. Not even realizing that when the US goes down and the rest of the Western democracies go down, yeah, China's going to have a pretty bad day. Russia might think this is going to be the best thing ever when the entire Western world collapses. And Russia's going to be just fine. Yeah, Russia's going to be just fine for a little while. They're not going to be just fine for very long. Which is where I want to end this. Because I did say that I had one thing for you at the end. I did have a white pill for you, and I do. Of course, if the black pill is the system cannot be fixed, and it is broken, the white pill is everything's going to be okay. And so, while white pills are definitely something that is hard to come by these days, I do want to leave you with one, and that is everything's going to be okay. Now, that's kind of a hard one to swallow after I just gave you all of this for the last 2 hours and 15 minutes now, give or take. But let me explain this to you. The Earth has been here for I don't know, some 280 billion years, I think. I'm not sure. I'm not looking it up either. The Earth has been here a long time. It has seen the rise and fall of the microbe and the very earliest of crustaceans. It saw the Cambrian explosion. It also saw the mass extinction after the Cambrian explosion. It has seen the dinosaurs. It has seen ice ages. It has seen meteors and fires and volcanoes. It has seen the rise of humanity. The Earth will be here after humanity, too. But humanity is not going to go away anytime soon. It's not going to go away in our lifetime either. So anybody who is saying that we are like on the cusp of doomsday, the economy is going to collapse and people are going to die in massive numbers. Well, no, okay, that one actually might happen. But when you have people that are coming out and saying, like, if we don't do anything about the climate, we're all going to die from climate change and things like that, ignore them. They don't know what they're talking about. Trust me, the effect that humans have on the climate is not nearly as big as people think. Like, the entire world temperature cooled by like 1 degree Celsius after 9/11. Why? Because we stopped the entirety of air travel after 9/11. Which means that, by extension, in reverse, logically, all of the emissions that humanity is putting out through air travel is only enough to raise the temperature of the planet by 1 degree. Put on a t-shirt. All the people that are doomsaying that we're going to destroy the planet, they have no idea what they're talking about. So you don't have to worry about that. There's white pill number 1 for you. White pill number 2. The whole leftist woke religion thing that is waging war currently in Western society. They're going to lose. And how do I say that so confidently? How do I know that they're going to lose? Well, they're going to lose because I'm going to go back to something that we have discussed ad nauseum before. And I'm going to bring it up right here. We've seen it before. There it is. Let me bring this picture back up. Open in a new tab. We remember this picture. We've looked at this one once or twice. We discussed in depth the 7 deadly sins and why, if you take them from an objective standpoint and not a religious one, why the 7 deadly sins are basically the anathema to a flourishing civilization. Why pride will cause a country to destroy itself, basically through stupid mistakes. Why sloth and envy and lust will keep you from doing what you need to do to keep the system running. We discussed this ad nauseum, and I would implore you to go back and watch my conversations on evil for a more in-depth discussion there. But I bring this up because, as we discussed in those, you cannot have a civilization that indulges in all of these things and have that civilization survive. It cannot be done. Sooner or later, your civilization will collapse if these are indulged. And what do we see from the left? What do we see from the entire woke religion that we have seen spring up across the Western world? It is indulgent in all 7 of them. It is prideful to the point where they literally put it on banners. It is greedy. We have seen it take in millions upon millions of dollars. And where has it gone? into the hands of a precious few and then squandered. It is wrathful towards anybody who is not explicitly supporting of it. It is a movement that believes if you are not with it, then you are against it. It is gluttonous, it is lustful, it is envious of the things that have been built that it does not possess, and it is slothful because it does not want to necessarily build those things, it wants to co-opt them. The leftist woke religion is indulgent in all 7 of these things. And as we have discussed before, it may not send you to hell. I cannot prove that there is a hell that you're going to go to if you indulge in them, but I do know this. If you indulge in these 7 deadly sins, you will end up dead. Because you will either end up without food, without water, without shelter, or without air. Yes, air, because if somebody is wrathful towards you, they may just strangle the air out of your lungs. This is why it is not going to win. This is also why people are always worried about China or Russia taking over. Russia already wanted to take over the world once. Okay? They called it the Soviet Union, and what happened to it? That's right, it's gone. Also, Grow More Facts and Vraj are also back here, so great, good to have you back here. Russia, in fact, is an entire history of trying to build empires and failing miserably at them. Germany tried to build an empire, a totalitarian fascist empire, and look what happened. They thought that they could take on the entire world. The world said no. And fascist Germany was stopped. Under, who was it? I believe it was Mao? I believe it was Mao Zedong in China. Thought that he could lead China into a glorious new empire. I believe it was Mao's Great Leap Forward. Somebody can correct me in the chat. History is not my strong suit, but I do believe that it was the Great Leap Forward under Mao Zedong that was supposed to revolutionize China. It didn't. It murdered several tens of millions of Chinese, and the end result of that was China is no more or less powerful than it ever was before or after. I'm not saying that China's not powerful, I'm just saying that the totalitarian empire that was supposed to be the new Chinese world domination never happened. Every single totalitarian dictator in history, every single person in history who said, I will tell you how to live, how to walk, how to eat, how to sleep, how to breathe. Every single person who has said that they know better has failed. Every single one of them has failed, and they did not fail before they put millions of people in the dirt. But they did fail eventually. So when I say that I have a white pill for you and that things are going to be okay, I am not going to tell you that they're going to be okay in your lifetime. I am not going to say that things are hard now and they're going to get better for you. I'm not even going to necessarily say that they're going to get better for your children. All I can say is that things will get better eventually because none of these systems that they want to put in place ever work out in the long term. Sooner or later, it will all fall apart because they're not interested in fixing things. The system is broken and they're not interested in fixing it. And it's their system that's broken, so when they try to put their system in place, it's not going to work. It was broken from the beginning. They're not going to be able to fix it into something that will work, and they're only going to be able to keep it going for very long, or for so long. And this is actually very, very obvious. Consider things that the left, the woke religion are pushing. things like homosexuality. I have no problem with homosexuals. If they want to be homosexual, fine. I don't care. Look, I've seen a few guys and I'm just like, damn, I'd do that. But you know what you don't get from homosexual relationships? You don't get children. You know what happens if you don't get children? Then when you die, there's no one left to carry on. The same thing goes for abortion. While I am not a person who wants to ban abortion outright, I would be fine with just restricting it. The fact is that they have pushed abortion to the point where, in certain places, there are more people aborted than are born. Mostly in the black populations. If the number of people being aborted than born is going on, you have a declining population. Sooner or later, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the day after, but sooner or later, you're going to run out. The same thing is also true of the entire trans movement. The one thing that they do not want to talk about. They talk about how, trans people have higher suicide rates. Trans people have higher rates of depression. The one thing that they do not talk about is that some of the hormone treatments that they give and some of the chemical treatments they give, and 100% all of these surgical procedures that they do sterilize the patient. You cannot go male to female or female to male and remain fertile. Going female to male includes the removal of the uterus and the ovaries. Going male to female includes the removal of the testicles. The one commonality among any of these procedures is the sterilization of the patient. Sterile people don't have children. And if you don't have children, eventually you run out of people. I have heard it said that gay people don't have children, they have yours. This is true. This is why they have made such an effort to get their ideology and their indoctrination into places like schools. However, this is a stopgap. While they can do that, they have managed to get all of their ideology into schools of every level, from elementary schools, teaching kids as low as first grade or sometimes even kindergarten what sex toys are and how to use them, all the way up through universities who are literally teaching people how to be activists. Eventually, they will still run out of people. And when conservative people outnumber them, they will simply stop paying attention to their ideology. They're going to run out of people, which is what they always do. In Maoist China and in Stalinist Russia, they ran out of people. In that case, it was farmers. They ran out of farmers. Because they kept trying to tell people what they had to grow, where they had to grow it, how much they had to grow of it, and then they took everything that they grew. Eventually, they ran out of farmers, and when they ran out of farmers, they ran out of food. And thus they collapsed. When it came to fascist totalitarian Germany, they ran out of friends. When it's just your three countries against the entire world, one of them is on the other side of the world, and one of them is trying to fight off Egypt with noodles. Yeah, the Nazi totalitarian regime didn't really stand much of a chance. Not to mention that in Italy, Mussolini's own country hated him. So that wasn't going to last very long there. The fact is, I don't know when it's going to end. And let's be honest, even when it does end, it will probably only be a matter of time before it starts up all over again. History repeats. Some people like to say that history rhymes. It doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. Either way, it's all cyclical. Because lessons are learned and then forgotten. But it always does come back to everything is going to be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not in your lifetime. But things are always going to be okay. So no matter how black the pill is right now, and right now the pill is very, very black, I can tell you that whatever hardships that we go through right now, they'll be worth it. In the end, everything that we do today will lead towards one inevitability. We're going to be fine. So, I think this is probably going to be a good place to leave this one off here. I hope that you found something worth this discussion that's been going on for 2.5 hours now. I could probably keep going, but eventually somebody's going to get bored and tell me to shut up. And if you didn't, then, like, wow, you are just a glutton for punishment. So, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to leave it off here. I'm going to take a break myself. It is Easter weekend. I do have some stuff to get done. Got to get some cooking done for tomorrow. Got a big dinner. It's going to be fun. But, thank you for attending this lecture. Again, I hope that you took something away from it. I hope that I did at least some good up here. I at least seem to have brought in some new people. I'm glad to have you here. I didn't expect anybody to show up to this one, honestly. So to the fact that I saw new people come in, you just made my entire weekend. And I hope I'll see you back here on more weekends too. So very importantly, since I do have new people here, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I try to do these lectures every single weekend. I try to do them every Saturday. I need more topics to do them, otherwise I'm going to have to start skipping a couple of weekends here because I'm running out of topics. But I do try to keep them up. So subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of thing, or if you enjoy anything else I do. Most of it's gaming related, but I try to put something back into the culture for, everything that I take out of it. So subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you get notified when the videos actually come out. As far as notifications go, if you haven't joined my Discord server, it should be linked below. Let me check that real quick. Is it linked? Yes, it is linked. I hope the link actually works. Should work. It's down there under all the other links. So, subscribe to the Discord. I do try to put out notifications for these in the Discord. Not just my Discord, but other Discords. But still, I put the notifications in there before these things go off. Plus, it's always good to have people there to talk to. We can discuss anything you want. If you know somebody else who also could use this discussion, kind of a long discussion, but if they're like mowing the lawn or doing something like that, put it on like a podcast, share this video with them. Might be worth their time. Otherwise, leave me a like on the stream, leave a comment down below, especially if you've got other topics that you'd like to hear me cover. I will take your suggestions and turn them back on you. So leave a comment down below, and I guess I will see you next time. So have a good day, have a good Easter if you're of that persuasion, and I will see you next time. Until then, take care.